All right, welcome back. Welcome back. You're still watching Citizen Planet on Daybreak, this 5th day of September 2023. And I'm here in studio with the panelists from academia, from energy production or the energy sector, from banking sector, but from also advocacy. And we were at the point of talking about what we're witnessing in different parts of the continent. Prof, so you have an institution, Wangari Maathai Institute of Peace and Environmental Studies. Yeah. And it's been on for 20 years now? Since 2003?
Since 2010, thereabout, yeah.
2010, okay. So that's 13 years.
Yeah.
What would you say has been the contribution of that in creating awareness? Because there has been this nexus between challenges with the environment or with the climate and peace or conflict and how it gets resolved, especially if you're talking about areas facing severe drought situations, whether it's in the northern Kenya or whether it's parts of the Rift Valley. What has been your experience there? And are we finding solutions through mainstreaming such kind of training and research?
Yes. We have been working together with the other players, partners, because Wangari Maathai Institute have a very good convening power to get people to come and discuss different issues and go and begin to apply some of the discussions that have been there. Like I mentioned, just yesterday we had Ban Ki-moon, we had Graça Machel, we had Adesina, the president of African Development Bank. We had the vice president of IMF, and we had also a minister for international relations from Norway. So we have very good convening power of different people coming to discuss, and hopefully we expect that they will go and transmit some of the things, of the thoughts that have come out of there, especially now that they come there to interact with the students. The institute brings its own students who it has admitted for various programs. We have 2 programs there, the PhD in environmental governance and management and the Masters on environmental governance. But we draw in students also from different disciplines, whether you are in sociology or you are in sciences, biology, because this issue of environment cannot be dealt by one single discipline. It's a holistic and multidisciplinary kind of training. So we have trained many students who have graduated and they have gone on to take different positions, whether starting their own lobbying forums on what we need to be done, and others have gone forward to be employed at the SAF and even apply that knowledge. Yeah. This issue of the climate change is something that we cannot fail. There's no option for failing to address the problem. Because what I mentioned earlier about the Noah's Ark, if we don't do something, we all disappear. I believe that there is need, as we continue to move on as countries, as the world leaders, that we must begin to identify the priorities. Each country must identify what it needs to work on, because there are so many things. You know, Wangari Maathai had this thing, she talked about the hummingbird story. And she always said, you just do the little you can. Because she talks about the hummingbird, there was this fire, and just a little bird chose to get a drop and try to put off the fire when there were other larger animals which could have done even much more. So the thing is, everyone must do something, but we must try to translate the talk into action. And therefore, carrying out research and beginning to identify what are the action points we need to take is very, very critical and important.
Right.
For example, you find in the morning, when you are going to work, you find so many people coming from area of Westlands, from Kangemi, from Kangwale, from different places walking. So many of them. And you start to think that if these people get a little more money because they are working, because the transport is becoming more and more expensive. If they get more money, perhaps what will happen is that they will start taking now public transport. And if they do that, there will be more vehicles on the road and therefore more emissions.
Right.
You get it?
Right.
We have to begin to think about, how can we use the sun that we have? And it's begin to think about how do we create cycling areas for those who want to go to work with the bicycle or with motorcycles. You get it? So we have to begin as a country to invest in now, and we need to, not tomorrow, because those people are there now, and we need to address. I believe that even it was safer to ride a bicycle, they would ride a bicycle to work. But now it is the road, they are competing with other vehicles, and they believe that that's not safe enough.
Yes.
But why not do that? Because then there will be no emissions. We will reduce emissions, and those people will not think anymore of going to look for public transport and therefore fuel emissions and all that. So there are things that can be done.
Right.
But we have to, every country need to identify, what do I need to do? Like just a hummingbird. And you do that little thing, you say it is just transport. We want to manage transport. Or we want to manage the issue of energy. Harvesting the solar energy and using it for different things like that. Or we want to ensure we address the issue of waste management. Yeah, and you say these 2 years, this is what we are going to address, because unless we do this, we are going to continue talking because the problem is big. Yeah. I believe that if Noah has thought that all this description was being given of the huge ark he was going to do, if he was actually to discuss about where to get the wood, where to get this, I believe there will be no generation that would have gone beyond him.
Right.
So we must do something. And I think the education institutions like ours is important in providing the knowledge and the research on what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. Yeah.
And Prof, you raised an important point about, should I say, green transport means. But what are your thoughts? Because might we turn ourselves into just a market for exports of electric vehicles, electric motorcycles, electric bicycles? Because at the moment we import, out of our imports, 24% is petroleum products. Might we just convert ourselves into a dumping ground for expensive imports?
Yes, we are not doing well on the issue of innovation and the entrepreneurship. We have not invested enough in the area of innovation so that we begin to produce our own products from here. We don't become a dumping ground, because that has become also a big issue on also waste management. Because when we keep importing, including even toilets, for example, you import, and then after that they change a few parts of that, then you have to dump the whole thing and import another one. When we have clay, we have soil where we can make. So we must now, as a people, and that's what everybody has done out there in the world to survive. Right. You must begin to manufacture the things you need yourself. Yes. And we have the capacity. Kenyans are very bright people. It's only what we require is only government to prioritize the issue of innovation and entrepreneurship and invest in it. Because even you know, most of the innovations we have had in this country has been driven by just the individual. It's not because there has been a support from the institutions to lead to that. Even whether it's M-Pesa or anything, it's just individuals who decided to do, I want to do this. But can we mainstream this and institutionalize it and say, this amount of money is going to be put on research to ensure that we begin to produce our own products, to manufacture our own products that we use here. You know, in 2013, the country committed to this and put that 2% of our GDP is going to be set aside for research to address all these problems and to issue of manufacturing and all that. But we haven't done it until now. What we prefer to do is maybe if we do roads and bridges and all that, it's a good thing, they look beautiful, but we need more money to maintain them. But if we invested on research, innovation and entrepreneurship, then we generate wealth because we will be selling our products outside Kenya now and bringing more money.
And Prof, I remember during the pandemic, that is 2010, 2021, there was an innovation that came from the Kenyatta University on ventilators.
Yes.
And the president then indicated that the team would be assisted to make sure that it becomes a properly produced innovation. What is our challenge at the universities in nurturing innovation to an extent that after all these years, how old is the university? How many years? Is it 50 or?
Yes, University of Nairobi has been on since 1956,
So that's a lot, close to 70 years.
Yes.
So what have we been able to produce from our university so that as we speak of innovation of the future, the universities are taking lead in that?
Yeah. You know, universities for quite some years now, and that's why we have must change course. We must change course. There's been more in terms of training people to go and serve in certain sectors. And that is not what other universities now are doing. I think there was some time, there was a need because the jobs were there and you were training people to go and take up jobs. We need now, and this is a program we are beginning to, at the University of Nairobi, and saying, we have the best minds in the university. We must begin to develop a culture of innovation and entrepreneurship.
Right.
Because we have possibilities, whether it's in arts and design, to come up with the various designs or arts that can help the students who came up with those ideas to make money, and because they sell those locally and outside the country. In agriculture, we have been doing a lot of research, for example, on issues of how to manage waste or how to preserve foods longer, whether it's fruits or vegetables.
Right.
Okay? So, and that also, when you preserve, then you reduce wastage.
Right.
So we need to, there's definitely need to invest in that area and to reorient our training in the universities. I visited the university in Denmark the other day, because this is one of the areas now, as a vice chancellor, I'm very keen about, where it is a faculty just of engineering, but they come up with 2 startups every week, driven by students, which resort to business.
Okay.
Yeah. What have they done? They have tried to do engineering and business. And they have integrated, instead of having school of business there and school of engineering here, it is one school.
All right.
You see, we have to begin to rethink even the way we have been training in silos. You get it? That this engineer needed to be exposed to the needs, because they have the knowledge to invent, but they need to know the needs. I saw another day one of our heads of department from Department of Child Health, what they call pediatrics, and the chairman engineering, so he invited the chairman engineering, he said, you come and see what we do here. Then looks at the way they deal with the problem of newborn kids and what happens when they have high bilirubin in their system, and what you need now to get UV light and control. And he said, instead of importing, this one we can make. So there is need to begin to break those silos in the training, because they are the traditional systems that we were left with. How do we ensure that the engineers are working with the medics, are working with the business people? So that is a new university.
All right. So bilirubin is what causes jaundice?
Yes, jaundice. Yeah.
Okay. So Mendi, when you listen to these conversations about looking for solutions for the future, I saw the president of Kenya driving into the KICC in an electric vehicle, which is certainly imported. What are you doing to finance innovation? Because there are certain things that have not been done elsewhere. I mean, electric car is a conversation that has started probably in the last decade or just slightly over a decade. Yet we're still lagging behind. We were the first to the M-Pesa, we keep saying that. But on other fronts, we are not doing as well. What are you doing in terms of financing such kind of innovations that would be giving Kenya and Africa an edge?
Thanks for that question. So I'll answer the question, and then I'll also pose maybe a challenge back to everybody in terms of some of the things that lead to these problems. So at the KCB Foundation, one of the things that we are very, very, very clear about is that when it comes to supporting MSMEs, so these small and medium enterprises, the micro enterprises, that are actually the ones that are going to be supporting things around clean transport. So the battery charging, they are the ones that are going to be these border riders. They are the ones who are going to be actually coming up with these innovations. So we have a very clear plan in terms of making sure that we support these entrepreneurs. Our flagship program is called Tujiajiri. And what we try to do is to make sure that we work with partners, so the universities, in terms of making sure when it comes to the skill set that we need for these entrepreneurs to actually be able to get into entrepreneurship, that actually is happening. We also work to make sure that when it comes to affordable financing, that is also available to these entrepreneurs. There's also something else that we absolutely need to do, which is when working with these entrepreneurs, providing them with the skills that they need, be it business development skills, be it sometimes, if let's say I am a beekeeper, and in the context of sustainability, it's important because I'm a beekeeper, because what I want to do is to do this beekeeping so that I'm maybe not harvesting charcoal or harvesting wood in the forest, right? So it's also working with institutions like KEBS to make sure that this beekeeper is able to provide honey up to a certain technical standard. Right. So this is basically what we're trying to do, which is to make sure that entrepreneurs have the skills, they have the affordable credit. We have business products that we've developed as a bank that are actually targeted towards these entrepreneurs and that really speak towards the very specific needs of these people who have maybe come up with an innovation. But allow me to also maybe make 2 points, maybe 2 provocations. The whole conversation around innovation, I think it would be remiss of us to also not remark that it's not an even or equal playing field, because we are starting off from a place where things like affordable credit, that is not something that is basically affordable to the global south. The president has spoken about it. It is something that we all feel as a global south. Another issue is things like affordable power, right? And the fact that a lot of these industries that we are saying we want to compete with are built on really long, very long and deep traditions of extraction and colonialism. So it is maybe an uneven competition, and I absolutely hear what the president is saying in terms of if you're trying to have change, complaint and change do not necessarily coexist in the same place. But to some extent, and I'm happy to be corrected, everything that we're doing as the global south, it's almost tilting at windmills unless, you know, the global, the West decarbonize the economies, right? So there's a certain I don't want to say futility, but there's a certain truth to the activities that we do. And yeah, we do our bit, because I really like the analogy that Prof said in terms of the hummingbird. But it's important if we situate it in terms of this is the broader context that we operate in. And I think Ola was also referencing quite a bit of that.
Interesting. You said a lot. But also, when you say affordable financing, what are you talking about here?
So it's a broader conversation in terms of when you think of the credit that our governments, so sovereign governments, are able to get from the West. I think the president was talking about it not too long ago in terms of the rates that we get, be it from DFIs. It's absolutely not comparable to other countries that are not from the global south. And there are others who are economists. I am in the space of, social science. There are others who are economists who are really trying to challenge this misperception of how risky African nations are, because African nations, from what I have seen, are absolutely not risky. So if that is loaded on us, then anything we do downstream, it already starts with this, like really front-loaded, really, really expensive credit that we have to start with. But that's a bigger conversation.
Okay, I hear you. Ola, what are your thoughts about when all these things have to be done, we are all looking for a solution, the young people are suffering from lack of opportunities. I mean, it is across Africa, really. Access to credit is a problem. Capital is a problem. Land, not necessarily the best asset that they have. But they have now to innovate and get propelled to the future instead of going to look for jobs like what some universities have been training learners to do. Where do the young people find themselves in this conversation? And what are the possibilities of success if you're to go that direction?
Sure. I'll answer that question and also speak to what you said, because I think they are somewhat related. Tackling the climate crisis, or rather aligning our development with climate resiliency, is imperative for our youth. The opportunities that we're speaking about, if harnessed properly, things like our renewable energy. Energy is the backbone of economy, of industry. We cannot industrialize, we cannot manufacture, we cannot move on to higher value processes without an energy system that we can rely on. In the break, you asked me about South Africa, right? We are experiencing rolling blackouts for years now, and it is decimating small business. And small business provides so many jobs on this continent. So when we talk about investing in our renewable energy potential, we're talking about investing in reliable and affordable energy that can help power industry and create jobs for young people. When we're talking about our critical minerals, we are saying we don't just want to be exporters of these commodities that we've had for decades, right? We export oil, we export gas, we can export lithium, we can export cobalt, we can keep doing it, right? But we're saying, because we have such big reserves of these things, why can't we produce batteries here in our African countries? Why can't we get from Congo the cobalt, and then it goes to South Africa, and there's a manufacturing of the batteries? Why can't we get together and build these hubs, right? And produce these higher value products so that we're keeping more of the value of these things in our continent, right? Instead of exporting cobalt, they make the batteries, we re-import them, and we pay a premium on that, right? These are all job-creating opportunities, right? But it requires us to think about doing development a different way and think about not just being the world's source of raw materials. So I think what the youth are saying is, let's think bigger. Let's keep more of the value here so that we have more options of things that we can do, right? And we don't have to go elsewhere to be able to do those things. Now, the issue of finance is a barrier to realizing this potential. You spoke about how costly it is for our nations to borrow. So, African countries in the early 2000s, interest rates for borrowing were quite low, right? But now in the post-pandemic environment, where we're seeing inflation because of expenditure by governments to safeguard their people during the pandemic, a lot of high-income countries have raised their interest rates to counter that inflation. But the problem is 80% of African debt is denominated in foreign currency, in US dollars. So when the US central bank raises interest rates, it makes our debt more expensive. It makes our debt interest payments more expensive. And so you have a situation where African countries that have lent from private markets that have put out government bonds like Kenya has, are finding themselves having to choose between paying public servants, nurses, teachers, or paying their interest on their bonds, right? And we are saying as an organization, when you have institutions like the multilateral development banks that can provide low interest finance, what our governments have taken on the market is like 5 times what they would have been paying if they had taken those loans from the World Bank, for example. So what we want to see is more concessional finance from multilateral development banks, because they're the better lender for governments, right? Because they offer better terms. And if we're going to see the investment at the scale that we need to achieve, to harness the potential that we have, we need to have more money from the multilateral development banks that can catalyze or that can attract private sector investment, so that it counters some of that risk, right? Because we see then the multilateral development banks are kind of taking on that whatever real risk does exist, because there is also the issue of perceived risk. This idea that Africa is somehow a worse place to do business or to put your money in, when actually we don't have that high default rates, right? And so I think these things are interlinked, right?
Okay.
If we don't make the investments that we need to, we are shutting out the youth from the possibility of the jobs that they need. And we need to create something like 15 million jobs per year for our youth. So it is imperative that we move towards a more industrialized path that is also compatible with climate.
You asked a question, why aren't we investing in ensuring that the raw materials are processed here into finished products? You answered a bit of it, but what is the bigger reason that you're not going that direction, that we continue to expose our minefields to foreigners and take away whatever they get out of there, and comes back in a proper package more expensively? What is that reason?
There are a few reasons. One of the things is not everybody can process or refine materials, right? So let's get that straight. I think the first thing we need to start with is we need more equitable terms when we're negotiating around our resources, right? So I think we've seen in DRC recently, and we've also seen in Botswana, a renegotiation of terms over things like the diamonds in Botswana, and in DRC, the cobalt, right? Because it was not working for them. They're not getting the level of royalties or keeping the revenue that they could from the sale of those raw materials. So that's one, right? Because if even, we can't process these things tomorrow, right? It takes time. But at least if we had more beneficial terms and kept more of the revenue from those sales within our government, then the government can at least use those resources to invest in those processes that we need to do. So that's one, right? That's at the base level. Then the other things are around the issue of energy. It takes energy to refine and to manufacture. So we need to deal with our energy deficit, right? And then the third thing is technical capacity. So we need to upskill our youth so that they are able to perform these things. And we need to invest in our own countries, like in the private sector in our own countries. So I would say those are some of the things that we can do.
Okay, all right. CEO, when you listen to the conversation, because she admits that they have had the challenges in South Africa in terms of power supply, not always reliable, yet they have most of those technologies that they're using to produce their power. As the president says, 93% renewable. Well, statistics say something different. But your thoughts about sustaining an economy on the side of energy, even as we innovate and you get into more of manufacturing, what are these steps that you have to take moving forward while ensuring that the cost of power, either remains as it is or reduces? Because at the moment, it is one of the most expensive things you have in Kenya.
Thank you very much, Sam. I think we must be alive to the fact that the renewables are very good, and we all love them. The only problem is that we must also remember that they have a limit. The sun shines in Africa most of the year, but there are times, we have day and night. We have wind, it's very beautiful, but sometimes also it goes down. And when you're thinking about, when you're thinking long term, you need to really think about the growing need for energy. And the blackouts that we are talking about, what are the solutions for that? You will need a source of energy that is stable and reliable and can provide base load, so that the manufacturing sector will know that when they turn on their machine,
right,
and they expect it to run for 8 hours, it will run for 8 hours, and there are no stoppages. And you look around the world and you see the developed countries, America, China, Russia, France, Britain, Germany, all of them have something that is clicking. France actually generates 70 or 75% of their energy from nuclear. I think America should be about 30% from nuclear, and they're growing that. And nuclear has actually been determined to be a stable source of energy. The experts indicate that you can actually have a nuclear power plant running 24 months non-stop, and you only stop for planned repair and maintenance. And a nuclear power plant can serve a country for 60 years with the possibility of renewal for 20 years. And we've talked about the coming technology of small modular reactors. The technology so advanced, and which is able to be adapted to different needs. So for example, if you need a plant to do water desalination in Mombasa, you have that doing that. If you want a plant to do to run industries in Nairobi, you have that. If you want a plant to light up rural Kenya, you have that. And therefore, with this technology that can actually provide you with stable energy that is not going to surprise you, then you solve that thing. And what are some of the benefits that will follow from that? Naturally, you will have the cost of power coming down. And the ripple effect of that is that every investor will want to go to a place where there's cheap energy.
Right.
Set up industries. What follows? More jobs are created. And as those industries come, the people working that start innovating, because maybe one of the things that is actually causing lack of innovation, and what you're talking about, that we are exporting raw materials to import manufactured products, and where we're net losers, is because we do not have power to run the industries that can do the value addition to the raw materials. So if we have this power that we need in Africa, we'll be able to have these industries that will be able to do the manufacturing, and therefore actually attain what we are talking about, right, and have Africa actually being developing their raw materials before they actually sell it to the outside world.
You speak favorably about the cost of power if it's to come from nuclear. We look at currently we have the independent power producers, and most of them are giving us thermal energy using diesel and such. And they said the reason why it's expensive is because of the cost of investment, and of course the return of investment that is expected, as because they have to put a little margin on top of that. How does that compare against a nuclear plant, for instance? Yes, you said that it has a life of about 60 years. You're saying that you can use the raw materials for a whole 2 years without any disruption. How does it compare in the long run to make our power cheaper?
Actually, maybe your question is okay. How I get your question is in terms of the initial investment in nuclear. Clearly, nuclear has heavy initial capital outlay at the beginning. But when you're talking about, let me give us a simple example. If you want to carry your bananas from the farm to the market, you can decide to use a bicycle, or you can decide to use a small pickup, or you can decide to use a truck. All of them will do the transportation, but it depends on how you want to do the transportation. Whether you have a lot of bananas you want to transport, or you have, if you have like 2 bananas, you'll use a bicycle. If you have 500 bananas, you'd use a pickup. And if you have 1,000 bananas, a truck makes a lot of sense. And this is where we are moving. Probably our energy needs at the beginning were not so much, and it was okay that we go for what served us. But as this need grows, we must actually think of what will serve us. And therefore, nuclear will be able to provide you energy that can do the heavy lifting. And right, it's expensive at the beginning, but it will be able to serve you. And in the long term, it actually, the net effect is that in the long term, it's much, much cheaper. And the experts have also told us that if the plant is actually utilized well, we are talking about a plant which is able to pay off itself within 17 years. And minus 17 years from the 60 years, then the remaining, is it 40?
43.
43 years, you're now getting very cheap electricity. As I've already mentioned, investment will come, industries will grow, employment will be created, there'll be more money in the pockets of Kenyans, the way our president always articulates. We'll have less dollars going out and actually more dollars coming in. And therefore, we actually are able even to stabilize our forex exchange. Yeah.
And so, yes, you're saying there's new technology for portability, but for instance, Kenya's demand at the moment, I think at the peak hours is about 2,000 megawatts. How many plants would you need to produce that, nuclear plants?
In terms of?
I'm saying the current demand during peak hours would be 2,000 megawatts.
Yes.
Nationally.
Yeah.
So how many nuclear plants would you need to produce that?
No, if you're talking about the traditional nuclear power plant, the big one that is one, it is going to produce 1,000 megawatts and above.
Okay.
But the small modular reactors are adaptable. You have some that can produce 300 megawatts, 400 megawatts, and we even have what are called micro-reactors that can produce at least at 40 megawatts. And that's why we're saying you will bring on board what you need, depending on your particular needs.
Okay, all right, fair point there. Let's take a look at the feedback that has come to us at Citizen TV Kenya. Sam Gichuku, the hashtag to use is Daybreak, and Kenyans adding their voices to this conversation. Lillian Sioi Honobo is saying that climate change is one of the greatest threats to humanity. Developing countries, though the least emitters are the most vulnerable to the effects of climate change. The ongoing summit will come up with concrete solutions. Okay, I'll weigh that if you agree that there will be concrete solutions out of this. Engineer Lazaro is saying that we had several high-level of climate summits before. It's now time to maintain talks by the actions, to match the talk with actions. Tackling global warming should be everyone's responsibility. Clean energy is the way to go, okay? Bob Otieno, Africa is good at talking, but they don't walk the talk. Hence, ACS 23 won't bear fruits because Big Brother, the West, are the biggest polluters, yet we depend on them almost in everything, even for the summit to be held. Is that so? Sir Nixon Dugire, is the carbon trade or even the carbon credit principles well understood in all quarters within our nation, or it's just magical thinking? It's time there be enhanced sensitization, especially in all the learning institutions. Okay. Remy Butia, African governments need to focus on climate actions in food systems. It should include securing the most impacted sources of food and reducing the vulnerable of rural food producers who depend on natural resources for livelihood. Okay, Babu Michael, the Moi government really stressed on tree planting those days and never relaxed on it. The previous government and now the Kenya Kwanza government is trying to put emphasis on it, but no much action. This summit should show us the importance of tree planting. All right, a lot of views here. Ibrahim Bakari is saying that we can only achieve a greener future if our external neighbors will correctly remunerate us on our task of making the carbon footprint reduce. Okay. And Godi Baraza, you're saying the only way the Western countries can appreciate Africa's efforts in reducing the carbon footprint is by paying the correct price of our carbon credits. This will greatly help in motivating the continent towards a green end. And Brian Chamoa, the summit has provided a platform for cooperation and diplomacy, fostering agreements and commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It will encourage individuals, businesses, and governments to take steps towards a more sustainable future. Let's reflect on some of those for now. And Ola, your thoughts about, because there's a lot of jargon thrown at every conversation about climate change and summits and when leaders from different parts of the world come together. But is it well understood by communities? What is it that we need to do so that the small efforts they make are informed and intended at a particular goal, never mind the hummingbird effect that it may be so small at the global scale?
You're asking whether communities understand what climate change is and how they're adapting to it? Okay. I think, yes, so I think in the beginning I mentioned how agriculture is one of the worst hit sectors by climate change. So we see a lot of adaptation there, and there's different forms of adaptation, right? People might choose to grow rice differently, you know, knowing that there's a flood or there's a drought. They might switch to different varieties, for example, if they have access to that, if they have access to the credit to afford it. Money underpins everything. But another way that people adapt is by moving. Migration is an adaptation practice. So some of the migration that we're seeing across regions is people's way of adapting. They no longer have access to the resources they need to survive in the places where they are, so they go somewhere else, right? So I think when we speak to communities about climate change, especially those in our more rural areas, we need to actually listen to them, right? So that when we talk about climate change, we can match our rhetoric to their reality, because they know it. They know it probably more intimately than some of us do, right? And so it's about asking them, what are the changes that they are seeing? What are the things that are becoming more difficult? And then linking it back to some of the wider topics that we're speaking about. Because some of them have ideas and they definitely have pain points, and both of those can inform how we move forward in our national strategies.
Okay, all right. And for you, Mindy, what is this that we need to do? Because, again, like some of those contributors are saying that carbon trading, we need to understand it. The West is the reason for where we are. Getting to that point of appreciation, what is carbon trading? And whatever comes from that, especially because, I mean, if there are payments to be made, they are made to governments. And we have always had these challenges of accountability in institutions. What is that countries should expect from their leadership in as far as accountability and explanation of what's going on even at the global scale?
That's a really good question, and I'll try to answer it maybe from the carbon credit perspective. So there's what the governments do in terms of carbon trading, and then I think a lot of the heat that we're also seeing, and perhaps quite a bit of the conversations that are coming through the chat and through the social media around the voluntary market. And one of the things that has been abundantly clear is that if we continue having prices around this market that are maybe pegged too low, and we continue having maybe a sense of accountability where people who are polluting can use the carbon credit system as a way of just greenwashing their efforts without making any demonstrable activities towards cleaning up their polluting activities, then we are just heading on towards a really catastrophic end. So I think there needs to be quite a bit of panel beating that happens there. I absolutely agree with the people who say the cost of carbon in the voluntary market is way too low. I think it should be much, much higher. And I absolutely think that the accountability when it comes to how polluters are also supposed to be held accountable for now making those cost corrections in terms of cleaning up their systems, that has to be part of this whole carbon credit conversation. Otherwise, yeah, we're just heading towards a very, very rapidly boiling planet.
And for you, CEO, what are your thoughts about getting to that moment that every institution, every individual, every business is well aware of what's going on and taking the small actions that trickle down to the rest of the society?
Thank you very much. I think sometimes when we're addressing these issues of climate change, we must look at all the 17 SDGs, because we keep on looking at some of them and ignoring some, and some of them are actually even lost. We have one like the one that talks about responsible consumption and production. It is what Prof is talking about. Very simple things which we need to really adopt. They say, even when you're thinking big, act small. When you leave a room, just switch off the light. And you go to Western capitals, you're encouraged to, if you can repeat using the towel that you used. Here you find someone goes to a hotel, and because there are 4 towels, he must use all the 4 of them. But even the hotel administration, why would it give 4 towels? And it looks very simple, but remember, washing 1 towel is cheaper than washing 4. The electricity you'll use, the soap you will use, and all these things. So we must think, even as we think big, we must also find these small solutions. And coming to the other issue, and the President touched on it yesterday, Africa tends to underestimate their contribution and the value that we should attach to what we have. And the President was talking about us having this carbon credit thing on our balance sheet. The West will put a lot of requirements on how we do it. When our flowers are going there, we must meet so many requirements. We should also find a way in which we are costing everything that we need to cost, our carbon sinks and all this, and actually demand for our rightful compensation for that. And this also goes to another SDG, which is about having just institutions that will actually address the concerns of the developed and the developing world. So that, as the President is saying, it is no longer an issue of who is right and who is wrong, but we are now trying to right the problem so that we all address the issue, knowing that we are in the same boat and we must find a way in which we are going to survive.
Okay. Prof, so research and extension is one of the main responsibilities of universities. Moving forward, where do you see possibilities in that area, especially for universities to get into that front at a time that there are so many challenges that universities face today, especially in Kenya? It's the question of financing. We're waiting to see if the new university funding model is going to be successful. What do you think is that role of the university in this conversation moving into the future?
I see that we should turn this challenge that we have now of the climate change into opportunities. Into opportunities for new products, new processes, and new jobs for the young people. And I see that we have to work, even as government reorganizes itself to ensure it puts in adequate resources for the research, as I indicated earlier. We have to begin to work closely with the industry, linking every faculty or department to begin to link with the industry so that you begin to know what are the problems they are confronting and how are they trying to solve this problem. Because we have the knowledge, the professors and the students start to solve this problem. Because if we begin that we are the one to begin to do business now, we don't have those resources. But the industry have, and if they see a business opportunity, then they will invest in it. So that's the way I see now as is a short term that we need to do. But government, I believe, need to put more resources in the innovation and research and innovation so that we create even new business outside the already business that's taking place now. Because this, where we are now, in this era of the climate change, this is a new world. It's not the one we were familiar. It's not where we are coming from. This is a new thing, and it requires new thinking, a lot of imagination, and those who are going to come up with those imaginations are these young people who are looking at the future, not us who are looking at the past, where we came from and giving how we solved this problem. This one is not going to be solved the way we did it before. It's going to be solved with the experience of today. And I believe the young people have been taught and trained in this environment.
Okay.
So I think in the short term is to begin to link with the practitioners, with the industry, so that we apply our minds into solving the problems that they have. But the long term, it is real investment being put into this so that the young people can apply their minds to solve the problems of tomorrow.
Okay, interesting. Prof, you mentioned something at the start that there are certain plans you had for the university, but you took a break.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain to us that, because there's been a bit of controversy whether you're the Vice-Chancellor, whether there's you took leave, long leave, terminal leave. What is going on there?
No, I just, you know, I've been working 24 hours for quite a long time, And since 2020, you know, when I was given the opportunity to serve the university, I started off in January 6th of 2020. And if you remember, on 17th of the same month, the CS Education came up with some other ideas when I had already served for 2 weeks. And I had to resolve that very quickly. And when I was coming in, I had quite some vision of what I want the University of Nairobi to be, because I've been there as a student and as a teacher, as an administrator for many years. So I had many ideas what I needed to do. But come March 2016 of the same year, COVID strikes. Again, I have now to begin to think about how to save the university from collapse. And I had to imagine how to do now online teaching and how to get the students and the faculty. And you remember I was here many times because many people did not believe that this is possible. But I thought that has to be done because if you leave the students out there, wherever they are, and they're not attending classes, then they can easily move on to other, and it becomes very difficult to get them back. And even end up not, even the teachers also. And you know, there are even schools, primary schools, that they converted them and started rearing chicken or something because the leadership was not clear, imaginative, very early enough. And there are hotels that also collapse, you know this.
Right.
So I had again to think and galvanize the entire university into this. Then after that, when we settled, then to begin the reforms. And again, you know, we came up with a 5-point agenda. So at this time now, I was starting to get fatigued. I thought that I actually need a very long time to rest. But after 1-2 weeks, I was already energized enough to go and do my work. Because, you know, I have the 5 years. And there is the things I had planned to do.
Okay.
And I cannot explain to the public that I was on leave. That's why I did not do those things. You get it?
So you have been working since January 2020
Yes.
up until which month this year?
Yes, up to I took a little break now on August 1st. Yeah?
August 2020.
And I came back on September 1st. Yeah. Yes.
That's 2 years, 8 months.
Yes. Yeah.
Without
without a break, and with these changes, I say, like the COVID and all this kind of thing, where every one time I needed to be on my toes. Yeah.
So how long was your leave?
1 whole month I took. Yeah.
What was the intention? You said that you needed a long leave.
I said I needed a long leave, but after, you know, that's how the body was telling.
How long was long, Professor?
I had said I needed like 6 months, yeah. But
so you cut it short?
Yeah, I cut it short. But even nobody, even the students and the faculty, nobody believed that I should be away that long, yeah. and the members of the public.
But why would...
Because of the things I have expressed, that where I want the university to go. I have pronounced those things in several fora. Yeah. So they wondered how that can be when I'm away.
Yeah. So how would you take 6 months leave? If you've been working for 2 years, 8 months, how does that amount to 6 months of leave?
You see, that's another thing. Those are what I said, but in reality, is not what is happening. That's what I'm saying. I'm back here.
Okay, so this was properly applied for, you had applied for leave?
I applied for leave.
And it was approved?
It was approved, and then I said, I still have work to do, because my contract is still running. I have work to do. I have to go back and do my work, which I committed to do.
So for you to cut short your leave, do you need the approval, or you just go back to the office?
You just go back to work,
And that's what
because you are still, you know, even when you are on leave, you are still the Vice Chancellor.
Okay.
It's not that you cease to be Vice Chancellor. You know, even the President of the country goes sometimes. You don't cease to be President because you have gone away.
So how is that playing around at the university with the management of the...
It's playing out very well. Obviously, there are certain people you hear saying this and saying that, but that's the nature of a university environment.
Okay. Professor, wish you all the best as you deal with that. But thank you all for making time for us to have this conversation. Mendy from KCB Foundation, Ola from One Campaign.
Thanks, Sam.
And CEO from NUPEA, right? Yes. Thank you so much for making time for us to have this conversation, and all the best in your endeavors as you continue this conversation about the climate change and the summit that is going on in Nairobi. My name is Sam Gituku. See you again some other time. Bye for now.
Thank you.